Welcome in today. I better get it started. Welcome in today with Him podcast. We are so excited that you're in here with us today. And we have an amazing guest today. Before I get to her, I want to thank my boy, Mikey Brownfield, for producing, because I forgot him our last show, which stinks and wasn't good. And also thanks to Dr. J, my awesome co-host. I'm Raz. And today we have actually one of our best friends in here.
Yes.
She is awesome. She's an amazing mom, amazing wife. Lord has done really cool things to her. She's a prophetic person's gifted in a number of things in the kingdom, is a kingdom person. And on top of all that, she also owns a business with her husband that is very successful. So anyway, we are so excited today to have with us Jacki Purcell.
Yeah.
Give it up.
Man, what an intro. I'm so excited to be here.
So, yeah, we love this, and we know Jacki, and she's awesome. So, anyway, one of my wife's good friends.
Well, I think highly of you, too, as well.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that we do, I think pretty much every show we've done this, even with each other, but really we love to honor the Lord, and so we love to hear people's God stories, and that honors Him so much. And so we just want to ask you, what's your God story like? Did you come into faith real young when you were a kid in your family, or just how did you come into following Jesus?
I think it's a really beautiful story, as most
always
are.
Is, I think.
Jesus.
Exactly.
But, when I think about coming to Jesus, I don't remember a stage in my life where I didn't want to come to Him. Like, as a little kid, I can remember praying to Him every single night. And it wasn't that I was necessarily raised to do that, so I don't even know where that, yearning came from to speak to Him at night. But I wanted to. And I would say there was a stage where I really wanted to get serious in following Him. And I can remember saying, I want to get baptized. I was probably around 10. And, to no fault to the people who were around me at that point, they really sat me down. And I remember them saying, you need to really consider the cost. But it wasn't necessarily the cost biblically, but it was more so the cost of religion. People who are Christians, they dress a certain way and they act a certain way and they talk a certain way. And have you considered that you're going to need to do that throughout your teenage years and your 20s and the rest of your life? And I remember taking from that conversation, to follow Jesus, I basically just have to be a complete dud. I can't be fun. I can't have a personality. I can't have a sense of style.
Right.
I can't do anything unique, creative, or anything that makes me laugh even, right? And so...
Can I break in here with a good Jamieism? I think we need to.
Sure.
Jamie, what is not in the list of the fruits of the Spirit?
Seriousness
Seriousness
is not a fruit of the Spirit.
You find that it is not there.
But the second one on the list is joy.
Joy.
There you go.
Yes.
I think I totally agree with you, Jacki. I think it's interesting how there are perceptions, and even people, it sounds like they were explicitly saying to you, or at the very least you were experiencing an implication from them,
Sure.
that if you're going to be a Christian and you're going to follow Jesus, this thing's going to be hard, not fun.
Yeah.
You need to be serious.
Very serious.
Very serious.
Yes, and very boring.
Actually, we're called to joy.
Joy. And that's actually what's attractive about Christianity. The people that I'm most attracted to in my life are really walking closely with Jesus. They're fun, they're funny, they're joy-filled. I want to be around them. That's their greatest testament. And so I think for a lot of my life, a lot of my teenage years, my early 20s, I spent so much time pursuing worldly fun, even though it was so empty and it was causing so much harm in my life. And I always say, God's revenge was really sending my husband into my life because he's one of the funnest people I've ever met. And I remember meeting him and he's telling me, how he loves the Lord and he's so funny and he's quick-witted and he's going to love this podcast.
Keep going, Jacki. Keep going.
I can hear him out there listening now. Yeah, you go, girl. You got it.
Joel's like, say what? Yeah.
And I remember just thinking wait, what? I remember him saying oh yeah, I went out with my small group last night. We went out to a club. We went out dancing. And I was like, what? You can go out with your small group and still love Jesus? Sign me up, right? And so I think he showed me this other version of Christianity, which was joy-filled, and it was fun, and I was really drawn to that. And I always think it's even funnier. He placed me in a church where, I'm around pastors all the time that are funny and sarcastic, and you encourage
church
people.
You go to?
Right. And so, as soon as I was able to, pair like fun and joy with Christianity, which is who Jesus is, that's when I was sold out for him. And so I ended up getting baptized in my early 20s. And I think the biggest challenge for me, even in my early 20s, was I still didn't hear from him. Like, I didn't know how to hear his voice. I would say I always had a prophetic gifting, but I really didn't know, what is that? What are these dreams I'm having? What are these visions I'm seeing? What are these things I know about people? Like, not really understanding what that was.
You were so hold on.
Yeah.
So you were experiencing some of these things. Sounds like I heard dreams, visions, knowing things about people.
Yep.
But you didn't know what that was?
No. So I had dreams as a young child.
I was going to ask, what age are we talking about here?
I can remember from about 5 up having dreams that now are pretty meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not understanding, like, oh, that's one of the ways Jesus speaks to us.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you said was you got baptized in your 20s. Did you not get baptized when you were like 10, or did you?
I did not.
You did not. You're like, okay, this cost sounds pretty costly.
It sounds costly, and it wasn't necessarily the cost of surrendering my life. It was what I understood, which was like surrendering to religion, which is, you have to follow the set of rules, and you have to be a complete dud and boring.
All right. I was just curious about that. So when you made that decision, you had at least a little bit better understanding.
Better understanding.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So, but go ahead. So with this prophetic stuff, I'm interested in this. When did you start to figure out that this was from the Lord? That was a gifting or whatever?
Yeah. So I think there was, at the church that I was at the time, they started doing these classes to teach people about gifts and about, walking in the prophetic. And I had really great mentors that came alongside me that started to teach me, like, this is what this is. And like, here's where it is in the Bible. And here's how you can walk this out. I'm like, oh, I'm not weird. I mean, I felt like such a stranger, if people really knew, what I was experiencing on the day to day, they would think I was such a weirdo. But even from that, I don't think I really understood to use my prophetic gifting to like get closer to Jesus until years after that. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, I had this dream. What does this mean? But I didn't understand, like, oh, I have this gift of visions and like seeing. Why am I not using that and asking Jesus to like let me encounter him face to face?
Right. Let me stop you for 1 second. This is for the listener out there. You might be like Jackie, where even as a kid, you're having these dreams. You're intuitive. That's what we always, in the world, we always want to call it intuitive. I remember stories like that of John Wimber. He would be like, nope, don't buy that building over there. Buy that building over there. And he wasn't in the kingdom. He didn't understand the kingdom yet and how it worked. They're like, man, that guy, he's always right. He thought that way. He's like, I just always know what, until he figured out that was Jesus speaking to him. But I really want to encourage you, because I have heard the statement you made a million times from people who have some prophetic gifting, like, okay, I'm not weird. I'm not I just want to free you up in that, because I think that's a demonic lie that comes on people like that, that it's like, oh, if people knew the dreams I had, if people knew that what I know about this person or think I know, and then you're hearing, well, you're crazy, you're not,
you're judgmental.
Or you're judgmental, or exactly, or and I have to confess, I kind of did this to Julie when we were early married. Is she would walk into a room and she'd be like, we're at a party or something. She'd be like, we're going home, and I'm like, man, that was a great party, blah blah blah, right? And she'd be like, man, Jackie's hurting, man. She's just, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you even talking about right now? And then sure enough, you call and be like, yeah, my mom just went in the hospital, whatever. She would just intuitively, and you've probably had some experiences like that as well. So my encouragement is that is the Lord, and don't let the evil one steal away that. And if we've, as we move through this podcast and whatnot, if you want to contact us about that stuff, about prophetic gifting and words of knowledge and all that, and we'll get into that more. But anyway, I just want to encourage that's the thing that Jackie said. I've heard that so many times. Like, oh, I'm not weird. I'm not. There's not something wrong with me, or whatever.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
And then, Jackie, I heard you say, and then I want you to pick up on this. I heard you say, I started to learn about this gift, started to be able to execute and understand it, but I also needed to learn how to do that with Jesus. Now, that's obviously, the title of this podcast. This is what we talk about. We love talking about. So when people,
we might talk about with him
like a
today.
Professional, just setting up stuff. It's amazing.
That was pretty good. I'm gonna give you a little bit right there.
Yeah.
All right, good job.
Less so when we name it, but still.
All right.
But talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
We can learn a skill, and not even in prophetic. It could be any skill. It could be playing guitar, playing music. It could be financial planning. All the things that we learn, and we learn how to execute something.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a shift to, I'm learning this. Now I'm learning how to partner with Jesus, the creator of the universe, who also gave me this gift. Right. But I'm actually learning from him, and I'm doing this with him. Just talk a little bit about that with regard to prophetic, learning the prophetic maybe as an execution.
Yep.
And then learning it with Jesus. Just talk a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think as somebody who really struggled with performance, it showed up in the prophetic dramatically. I mean, I would be in settings and feel like I needed to perform. I need to come up with something to share, and not that I was making things up, but like that is the posture in which I was showing up to ask Jesus for prophetic words. It's like, I need this. I need to perform, which is really ugly.
Yeah, what did that feel like?
Horrible. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel light and free. I can tell you that much. It just felt like I was performing, and trying to win his approval. And then when I would get it right, and I'd be like, "See, Jesus," like I was really just performing for him. And
oh wow.
I think the biggest shift for me is when I was able to start to meet him like face to face. And I was able to see, so like I had read scriptures and I had had so many people tell me about like who he was, and I understood that. But because like I shared with you, I had, a lot of worldly fun in my teens and my early 20s. And so I just could not wrap my head around a God who had forgiven me, or like a God who wasn't mad at me, who wasn't angry with me, or wasn't disappointed in who I was, and a God who didn't expect me to perform, somebody who just delighted in me when like the moment I wake up. Yeah. And I remember the first time I saw him face to face, and it just completely broke me, because I knew he really delights in me, and he's not mad at me.
That's right.
Yeah.
And all of the lies that the enemy was able to use to get me to perform and get me to believe, like, he's disappointed in you, he's mad at you. Yeah. It just fell off. And the more I started coming to him and I would see him face to face, and even when I was confessing, like these things that, I had done to him, and I was like, you can't forgive that, right? Like, I understand. Yeah. Like, there's some small things I did, like you can get that.
But, like, for a couple of these, but
these other things, like there's no way. And I'll never forget the way he looked at me, and I knew, I'm actually free. Yeah, I'm actually forgiven. Like what this word says in the Bible. Like, his blood has made me clean.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that.
So good.
Yeah.
So beautiful. I'm thinking about the person who's watching this and listening to this. And they're like, okay, they may be in that same spot. Mm-hmm. They know it intellectually. They read in the Bible, your sins are forgiven. Confess your sins. You will wash your... Yes. But then you say something like, I saw his face. Mm-hmm. Describe what you're... For the person who's listening who says, I don't know what she's talking about. Right. Is she like, is it a Zoom call? Is this,
did he show up in front of you?
Yeah, is this a manifestation, a physical manifestation? And it might have been. I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Yeah. Just for that person who's listening, what were the circumstances behind this sort of encounter? Because you knew things in the Word, but now you're encountering the living Word. Mm-hmm. So describe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So it's not this way for everybody, but one of the ways that I hear from him is I close my eyes and I sit in silence, and I can see kind of in my mind's eye, right? So I can see a vision of his face. I can see what he looks like. And sometimes it's very clear, and sometimes I just know it's him. I can't necessarily pick out his eye color or, his skin tone, but like, I just know it. I know it's him, right? Because there is a clear peace around me when I'm in front of this person, this Jesus. Yeah. And so for me, it's really visions when I close my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you closed your eyes in this moment that really kind of was a breakthrough moment, although I think I heard you say this was multiple experiences with the Lord. You're closing your eyes, you're picturing Jesus, you're seeing Jesus here, and that's what was breaking off some of this inability to believe that you were forgiven.
Yeah. So, okay, I can remember this specific ministry appointment I had gone to. Like, I just knew, when you're on this pursuit of freedom. And there's an area where you're like, I'm just not experiencing freedom. I'm not getting full freedom in this area, and I want it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd gone to a ministry appointment with a couple that will just basically pray with you. They'll intercede for you, but their entire mission is for you to be face to face with Jesus. So they're not closing their eyes and asking Jesus on your behalf. They're telling you to close your eyes, and they're just interceding for you to encounter him. And I can remember when they told me to do this, I was like, oh no, like I can't even look at him. Like I can't even cope with how he's going to look at me.
Right.
Like it's going to break me.
Yeah.
If I actually see how disappointed he is and who I am.
Because you knew in your heart he was disappointed with you.
Yes.
For how you
Yeah. He's so disappointed
imagined it.
in me.
And so if you saw him, that'd be even worse because then you're looking at him face to face.
And I'll know.
With you.
How could I ever bear that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know? And I actually think
That's
it
some
took
change.
hours.
Wow.
This sweet couple sat with me, and I don't know how long, but I know it was hours of them being like, you got to go back in. You got to look at him. And I couldn't do it. I was so afraid. And I remember as soon as I saw him, just being so surprised and taken back by
Wow.
everything I had heard was true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, last time we did a podcast, I think our last podcast we did, you shared the story again of the prodigal son. And that is, gosh, that's such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
'Cause Jesus is so clear on it. It's like, the father's the father, and then this horrible son comes home who's horrible. I mean, in every way that we would view it or judge it, And gosh, his affection for him is so great. I mean, just every part of that story would have ran against the grain of his listeners. For a rich, wealthy landowner to jump off his porch, I see it in my eyes. He's like, hitting the rails and then like doing the double off when he sees his son in the distance. And as you said last time, it's like he didn't even let it get his speech out. His affection is so great for his son coming home.
Yeah.
He doesn't even let him get his "I'm sorry" speech out.
The confession.
That's the father.
The confession wasn't even finished.
No.
The father
Not even
wouldn't let
close.
him finish the confession.
Yeah.
And he's kissing him. I mean,
yeah.
he's on him. He's hugging him. He's embracing him.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't know the good news. That This is the way the Father is with us because of Jesus.
Yes.
The Father is embracing us
Yeah.
and not pretending like we didn't sin.
Right.
That sin was placed on
Absolutely.
Jesus on the cross. I mean, this is
Right.
fantastically beautiful good news.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah, that Satan does not want you to know.
right. And
does not want you to
in
know
some
that.
ways, you didn't use this language, but in some ways, Jackie, it sounds like you were bound.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You were bound in a way of thinking about Jesus. Interestingly, you're also bound in thinking about Christianity in general, that it's got to be serious.
For sure.
But it's so important. The things that we think about the Lord, the things we think about Christianity, the things that we think about anything in life actually is a big deal
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for the trajectory of our life. And you saw Jesus, and it sounds like you began to see him for who he is and experience freedom there in that moment. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Is it Tozer? I'm going to come to the Tozer master, Dr. Jamie Moore. Is it Tozer? I think is it him that says the most important thing about you is the way you think about God.
Yeah, he says
You
the
think
most
about God.
Not to be technical.
No, please, please, master.
But he is going to be technical.
For the listener,
Please, doctor.
I did my PhD dissertation on Tozer,
Yes.
and that's the fanciest thing about me. Just what I just said.
No, Dr. Jamie.
He says the most important thing about you is what comes into your mind when you think about God.
There you go.
Yeah.
So when someone says, "Who's God?" the very first thing that enters into your brain, that's the most important thing about you, because it's going to shape the way you engage with God, this higher power. It's going to shape the way that you engage with other people.
Yep.
And when you think about God and he is a father who runs to you,
Smiling.
My goodness.
smiling, and when you go to
Arms
confess
open
your
wide.
sin, which is
Yeah.
legitimate, grievous sin,
Yeah.
Yep.
that he has placed on his son Jesus on the cross for you.
Which
when-
so grievous he had to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the wrath of God towards our sin was placed on Jesus. When that's the thought that goes into your mind, and then you see this Father and you see Jesus embracing you, it changes your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, you started to tear up just thinking about it, and it was however many years ago.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's-
it's probably
that's
4 or 5
powerful.
years ago, and
Yeah.
it's interesting. And that's really not that long as compared to so many people who've walked, closely with Jesus. But in the 4 to 5 years of meeting with him almost daily, he still shows up with a smile.
He's still not tired of you.
Yeah.
That's good. I love that.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Wow.
One last thing, and then I want to ask you a question. We talked about joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking about some of the people there might be some listeners that you're like, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. I'm not so sure. My pastor said we should be serious. Well, I'm just thinking about Jesus' first miracle.
Yep.
The very first moment when Jesus, this is in the Gospel of John, when Jesus is declaring, this is what my kingdom is like. This is the very first thing I'm going to do. The very first thing, this is going to set, it's going to be a sign that's going to set everyone's understanding of who I am and what I'm about. And it's not a lecture in a synagogue. It's not a formal treatise on the sovereignty of God.
Right.
It's not even raising someone from the dead. The first thing Jesus does, he has 3.5 years to do ministry, to literally save the world. And he's going to spend an entire week at a party. He's going to spend an entire week in the ancient Near East. A wedding would have lasted an entire week. He spent 1 full week at a party.
Yes.
Dancing.
Yes.
Celebrating.
Because he's fun.
Because he's awesomely
Because he's
fun.
joy.
And
I
I didn't even get to it. He took water and he turned it into wine.
Yeah.
Best wine.
The best wine that the master of the ceremonies had ever tasted.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that doesn't sound like a very serious, grumpy, crusty God. That sounds like somebody who really loves to be with people, even sinners. In fact, he was accused of gluttony and drunkenness because he hung out with sinners so much. Of course, he wasn't a glutton and he wasn't a drunkard.
Sure.
But because he loved being with people, and there was almost like, oh gosh, this is a man of joy.
Sure.
He was a man of sorrows for us on the cross, but he was a man of joy,
Yes.
giving us his joy.
Yes.
So anyway,
And what a powerful, I think about that a lot, like how the people who have influenced me the most in the kingdom are so joy-filled. And so I'm drawn to them. It's like nobody goes to somebody who is serious and miserable and a curmudgeon, and they're like, tell me how you've gotten this place into this
I
place.
can't wait to be there too.
Yeah, it's like, no, yeah, you're not thinking of them for your next podcast, you know? You're like, it's like you think of people where you're like, they have joy that's beyond their circumstances. What is that? Why are you so happy? I remember there was a time where somebody said, yeah, well, you know, easy for you. Everything's going great in your life. And I remember thinking, okay, first off, can I give you a quick breakdown of some of the things going on in my world?
easy
Because I
things
actually
going on,
think you must not know.
Right.
But also, I do have joy that goes beyond my circumstances because my joy is rooted in the Lord, right? It's not rooted in what is currently happening in my life. Yeah.
That's funny. I love that you use the word rooted. We actually have some discipleship classes here called Rooted, and mine, the best one. Lifestyle of worship. I got to get
They're
in here
always
today.
making a plug.
Anyway,
Everything is a competition.
everything's a
with you, Raz.
competition.
Yeah.
Communion with God is actually the best.
Actually, I think Jess is the most competitive, his
everyone
wife.
loves
But
Jess's class.
anyway, lifestyle of worship.
She does have a great
come to
class.
that. But one of the things that's really cool in there that we talk about is that sometimes worship changes our circumstances, but sometimes it doesn't. And you think about those guys that were in prison and they've been beaten and they're in prison. And then it says toward the wee hours of the night, then they just began to worship out, just began to praise the Lord
Yeah.
with joy, you know. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, where does that come from? See, that's
Right.
that's the problem. Your friend is thinking of it in a worldly way, like everything's going well, so I have joy. Well, that's the
Yeah.
world's way.
Yeah.
It's like, no, if God is living in us and we've had these experiences where we've seen him face to face, no matter what's going on, we will be filled with joy because it's a fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'm guilty of that thinking too. I can remember there was this time I went to like this extra event that was at our church, and there was the speaker that had been brought in, and I was running late, and I went to go just find the closest seat. Like, I'm late, I need to sit down, right? And I remember I sat down, and very clearly I heard, like, you're not going to sit here. And I was like, okay, well, like, the person at the front is saying, like, please sit down. Like, this guy needs to start talking, teaching. And I'm like, okay, well, where do you want me to sit, Jesus? And he just, like, really highlighted this older gentleman in the room. And so I went and sat next to him. No idea why, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm supposed to ask him to pray for me at the end. I don't know. And so that's what I'm thinking the whole time. Okay, Jesus, I'll just ask him to pray for me. Well, he gets up to leave. And I'm like, before the teaching's over, and I'm like, well, my plan is ruined. What are we doing here, Jesus? And as he's getting ready to leave, he turns around and he hands me this note, the older gentleman. And the note says, your joy will save lives.
Oh, my gosh.
And
He handed you that note?
yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Whoa.
And I remember thinking,
Wow.
in my immaturity, this is so great. Jesus is going to make all things right in my life. And I'm going to be so joyful.
Yeah, because everything will be perfect. Everything will be joyful.
And you know what he didn't do?
Right.
He didn't
Wow.
fix all the circumstances in my life, but he did teach me. Because I remember thinking, man, Jesus, if that's true, like those little prayers where you're like with him and it's just a short, Jesus, if this is true, you know, teach me, show me, right? I want to save lives. I want to save my own life. Like, how do we do this?
Yeah.
And he just started to show me to be way more dependent upon him, and that's really where my joy would come from.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's a really good word right there.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but you said that when you heard from the Lord, again, this is an audible voice or this is just internal? Tell me about that. At this conference as you sat down or extra thing.
It's internal.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's internal.
It wasn't audible.
All right.
Nobody else heard it.
Right. So, but then you used the term, you said you looked over, you're like, well, where do I sit? And then you looked over and he highlighted this guy for you. What's that mean? You tell me what that means.
He wasn't glowing or anything
Okay,
like
I'm
that.
just asking.
But,
So bright
it's like,
yellow
yes.
highlighter, bright pink,
There you go.
maybe.
Jesus circled him. Like, right here, Jackie, sit down.
Okay.
More so, I just couldn't stop looking at this person.
Okay.
Like, I knew, like,
Yeah.
I just felt very drawn. Like,
Okay.
this is there. I'm in a room of probably 300 people. This is the
Wow.
only person I can see
Wow.
and I'm focused on.
Wow, that is awesome. That is so awesome. And then that guy has a note for you. Wow.
Unbelievable.
That is
Yeah.
fantastic. I love
Yeah.
that Christianity. I want to be a part of that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's so good.
For the listener who is thinking, I would love to walk in such things. I would love to be walking into a room and someone has highlighted to me, and they may be thinking I've never experienced that, or maybe some of you are thinking I have experienced that. What are some things you would share with that person about cultivating and even maybe stewarding? I don't know if that's the right word, but cultivating sort of an openness towards the Lord to really hear from Him. What are some just like a couple of things that you've found to be really helpful for that person?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell the listeners the same thing I tell my kids when they learn something new. Like, we don't start good at something. We get good with a lot of practice.
Right.
And my friends that, are really close to me, we laugh about kind of the early prophetic stories of me trying to walk in these giftings. I mean, I would give them these discombobulated words that made no sense. And I'm like, and here you go. I don't know what it means. And they're like, I don't know what to do with this either, and it was very messy and I didn't start good. Like, where my gifting is today is not at all where it started. And it really, truly just started with like, Jesus, I'm going to start listening to you more. I'm going to start sitting with you face to face. I'm going to just try to be more aware of that. Like in that moment when I walked in that room that day, I didn't have peace when I sat down. And then asking, why don't I have peace right now?
That's good.
Like, what is going on? So just almost being more like present with myself and in my surroundings. I'd say those are some small ways to start.
And I heard you asking questions. I've heard you multiple times describe, Jesus, what do you think about this? What should I do here? And that's something. There's something there of like, do you ask Jesus?
Yeah.
For answers?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's something interesting there. Talk a little bit about just the impulse. How did you come to an impulse of just asking a lot of questions like that?
I think I'm pretty curious in general, so I am wired that way. But I think my biggest life changes have come from these really small questions where I've just been like, I'm in a church service and something is presented to me that's new or profound, and I'm like, I've never thought of thinking like that, or I've never known that I could do that, or I could walk that way. And it's followed up with like, Jesus, if that's true, will you show me? Will you show me how to do that?
Wow.
And I think what's awesome too is often during those times where he's trying to teach me something new, he's brought in somebody new in my life to kind of like help. I'm almost like an Aaron to a Moses to like walk alongside me to say like, here's how you do this. And so I can think of some mentors who brought into my life where they just let me practice in the prophetic, and it was messy. And I can remember one of those being my neighbor. And I remember I would get these words for him, and I would go over to his house and be like, hey, I think Jesus is telling me to tell you whatever, you know? And he'd be like, that's great. I think there's more to it. Why don't you go back and ask Jesus what that means? You know, because I would just try to present. He said you're like a teddy bear. And he's like, well, what does that mean? Go back and ask Jesus, you know? And so he brought people into my life to help steward the gift and mature the gift as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the posture is what's really good is the posture of questioning, of expecting that God's going to answer. I think there's something of that too. Again, from James, it's like and you have not because you ask not.
Sure.
And then I wonder sometimes if this isn't some of what you're experiencing there, what Paul is talking about when he says praying constantly.
Yes.
Because that's a constant. I mean, it just seems like, okay, I'm walking in, you know, it's not, I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty natural or feels organic is what it sounds like to me from between you and Jesus, like that conversation. But it sounds like you're just having this continual, like, okay, well, I'm going to this thing. Is there somebody there you want me to meet? You know, and then it's like, I think I'm supposed to talk to this person. Am I supposed to talk to that?
Yeah.
You know, it's this continual conversation. So it's like, it's really living life with him at all levels. So I don't know. You know, when we talk about, when Paul makes a general statement like that,
Pray without ceasing.
like pray without ceasing, is that part of it? You know, because
Yeah.
sounds like God will respond. Like he's like, oh, thanks for asking. I think I'd like to speak into that.
I've actually been wanting you to learn that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, we think, again, I'm just speaking to at least a lot of the Christian faith, even you and I had, you know, it's like, honestly, our real minds, as Tozer was talking about, when we think about God, we're like, the big man upstairs, you know, he's got like the, you know, Iraq war going. He's got, you know, Israel's being, he's busy.
No,
He
yeah.
doesn't care where I sit in an auditorium.
Right.
Yes, he does. And by the way, he flung all the stars into space and just, you know, offhand named them. And as we, that's just an offhand statement. Oh, and they're all named, and not one of them is out of the sky that he doesn't know about. And then as we become greater at, you know, in science of getting out, we're like, holy cow, do we even know a number of stars?
Right. Right.
So I think he might be able to deal with, you know, war in Israel and talk to Jacki.
Yeah. Where do I sit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it makes me think like all of us have kiddos, and I'm just thinking about, you know, when I get stuck in terms of thinking about God, and I feel like I'm missing something, I usually try to move it into human relationships, like a father and a son, or a father and a daughter. And I'm just thinking about, you know, the kiddo. And we've all done this, and we've got kiddos who have done this, where the kiddo just wants to do it themselves, and they know how to do it, and you as the parent are sitting there going, yeah, you're not doing it. I mean, that's not the way to do it. But I'm going to wait for you to ask. There's something to the kiddo that's like, no, I've got it. Mom, I've got it.
Yeah.
And doesn't ever ask.
Right.
But the kiddo that goes, I don't know how to break these eggs and bake this whatever. And then, Mom, Dad, will you show me?
Yeah.
The parent then isn't going to be like, well, I'm going to try to make this really difficult for them to figure out. I'm going to try to be very cryptic right now. No, a good father and a good mother just goes, yep, here you go. You came to me, you asked.
Yeah.
I'm glad to speak. And I'm saying that because I know that in my life, I grew up in a tradition that didn't talk about these sorts of things of hearing from the Lord. And one of the big fears that I had when I first was presented with that idea is like, well, I've never heard God speak. I didn't think that I was hearing him.
Sure.
And then I was kind of scared. Well, what if he doesn't say anything? Or what if I'm not perceiving that he's saying anything? What does that mean about me? You know, all of a sudden now it's identity, it's a bunch of stuff. Would you speak to the person that's like, what if I don't hear anything? I ask a question. Oh, Jesus, where should I sit? And it's just silent or whatever. Just talk a little bit to that person that might be feeling a little bit like, oh, it's good for her.
Right.
He's talking to her all the time. I've never heard God speak.
Right.
What would you just say to that person?
Yeah. Well, I think first off, Scripture is very clear that, you know, prophecy is one of the gifts we're supposed to pursue the most. But I think I think where performance comes in is that when we go to him and we ask, that there has to be an outcome, right? So like outcome equals performance versus I think what is like the gold medal for Jesus is like you coming to him and being with him. Like I think the times where he speaks the least to me are when I come to him with my laundry list of questions. And I'm like, I actually need to get this answered, this answered, this answered. Can you just talk to me really quick? I got other things to do today. Versus the times where I just crawl up next to him and sit with him and I'm with him. Yeah. And it's like if we could reframe it that it's actually a win to just be with him.
There you go. There you go.
And to not hear.
That's good.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's still great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good.
That's so good.
Well, you talked about kiddos. You have a couple kiddos?
I have the coolest kiddos. I have two
You
girls.
Just give a mom a shot at it. And
Yes. Oh, I know everybody has great kids, but mine are the coolest. I have two daughters. They are 5 and 7, so kindergarten and second grade.
Awesome.
Oh, and they're
And
so
just started
sweet.
school. Like back to school was just last week.
You guys, they're in school.
Mom, are you okay with that? Like, how'd that go?
Yeah, I mean, talk about identity check, right?
Talk about it.
I guess that's
Why
what
we're here.
That's what we're here for.
Right.
It's perfectly timed, Jesus.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I had taken a sabbatical. We're going to talk about business here in a little bit, but I had taken a sabbatical for about 2 years and had just been at home with my daughters. And it was so precious and so sweet, and I loved it. And then, I'm moving into the stage where they're in school full time. And so I drop them off at 8 o'clock. I don't get to hang out with them again until 3:30. And so there's this transition period I'm in where, what it felt like for me is, and I'm still kind of working through this, is man, like it is such a privilege to be a mom and to be with kids and to shape their heart. And to move out of that stage, I've been kind of wrestling with, Jesus, what else could you have me do that could be this meaningful between 8 to 3?
Wow.
And
Wow.
I know that he will. And I know, but at the same time, if I'm being honest, I've been kind of grieving the loss of that season because it was so precious. And okay, let's be real. My kids haven't moved away. They're not in college. I get to pick them up at 3 today.
Right.
Yeah, Right. So you're right. It's a transition, though. I mean,
There's 7 hours a day where I don't get to do, this really important role that I've loved.
Right.
And so, it's a transition period for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I have a friend of ours here at the church who you know as well, and she's recently had a baby. And I remember early on, her and her husband, they're like, I don't know if we're gonna have kids or now she's had her baby. She literally says to me, first time she brings the baby to her, she's like, this is the greatest thing I've ever done.
Yes.
I think I want to have sex. I'm like, yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It is.
So that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
You described sabbatical.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that. Talk to me about what that was. What made you do such a thing? How did you even come up with this idea?
Yeah.
And some of the parameters and things around that. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. So I have been in business for about 15 years. And I would say, my oldest is 7. I would say when she was about 1, I really started to realize, I'm missing out on a lot during the day. And I really want to be with her. And I, once I had my second, I was like, oh, I really want to be here. Like, this is what I want to do. And I remember going to Jesus because at the time, there just wasn't the infrastructure in our business. I was like, this is like really what I want, but I don't know how to make that happen. Like, can you help me? Can you help me make this work?
Again, asking questions. Love it. Keep going.
And I remember just over this period of time, he started to bring people that were stepping into leadership roles, and they just had knowledge and they had skills. And it was starting to become very clear to me, like, the puzzle pieces are starting to fall into place, that if I were to step away, this doesn't crumble. Because, when you start a business, you're all the roles in the beginning. I'm the receptionist, I'm the flight attendant, I'm the one putting the bags on the, the plane, I'm the one handing out the drinks. Like, I'm doing all the things, right? And he started to bring people into all of those roles. It's interesting is even after all of the roles that I perceived to be filled, he still told me what's interesting. I remember in multiple ways, because I probably didn't want to hear it, he told me to wait a year. And I remember thinking, Jesus, I have this longing in my heart. Like, I want to be with my kids. This is a good and godly longing.
Right.
Right? And you're telling me to stay here. And I remember him saying, like, it's not time yet. It's not time yet.
Okay.
And it's so interesting what he did over that period of time. The things that he changed inside of our financial situation to make it easier for me to be able to step away. The things that he broke off that were just identities that I had about performance, fear of man, like what will people think about me if I step out of the workplace?
Right.
You know, what will our employees think about me? What will, you know?
And your own identity in that.
Yes.
That of being a businesswoman or whatever.
Yeah. Could I really be a mom?
Yeah.
And that's what I do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, what will I do all day? What will I
Exactly.
show for my work, right? This messy living room with toys. I mean, and I remember just it was one of those years where he was just pruning. I mean, thing after thing out of my identity. And I remember seeing you the day that I stepped away, and I remember you saying like, "How you doing?" And I'm like,
I remember this day too.
like you're expecting me to be like, "I'm not okay," you know? And I was like, I think I'm actually okay. And it was so kind. It was one of the first times I really understood that when we do things in his Kairos timing, like his timing, his biblical, like God ordained timing of when he created everything, when he set it in motion, if we follow that and we come to him and we submit it, there's such a peace and an ease about things, even when they're hard. There was still difficulty in stepping away from a business I had done for 13 years. There's still difficulty in having all those things pruned out of my identity. There's still difficulty at being at home with toddlers. But there was also such a peace and a joy because I had followed what he had laid out before me.
I heard you say I was being pruned, and then I heard you say this was also a joy. Talk about, and I understand what you're saying, but talk a little bit about that dynamic.
Yeah.
Of things being cut away, things being maybe crushed. Use whatever language you want to use, but the dynamic between those two things of the Lord is doing something very deep. It could even be painful at times, and also there's joy here at the same time.
Oh, goodness. There's not enough podcast time for this. But, you know, when I say pruning, I mean, I really think I just mean he was coming into the way I was thinking, and he was replacing it with, like, good and healthy thoughts, right? And so a lot of the way that I was thinking, I had such fear of man. You know, my identity was what other people said about me.
That's a good statement. Yep.
That was a really volatile way to live, right? And he started in that face-to-face time with him telling me who I was. And I started to realize, oh, it doesn't matter what anybody else is thinking about me or saying about me. Like, God of the universe says I'm pretty cool. I better choose to believe that.
Yeah.
You know, and I had a fear of not performing, right? Like, who am I if I'm not performing? And it's like, as a mom, I'm able to look at my daughters and think, the moment they walk into my room in the morning and they got their cute little PJs on, you know, they've done nothing I've asked them to do. They've not brushed. They've actually done the opposite of perform. They got up before I asked them to get up.
Right.
They didn't brush their teeth. They didn't make their bed.
Right.
Right? But I am so excited to be with them, you know? And the things that he started to break off in my thinking and heal and transform my mind during that year before he told me not to step away, because he wanted to do that before. So sweet, because my sabbatical wasn't spent with me ruminating on what do people think about me doing this, right? What do people think about me, say about me? Oh, I'm not performing today while I'm here building Legos for the 17th time and listening to Baby Shark for the 15th time. You know, it's like...
We will link the Baby Shark song at the bottom of this podcast so you
don't.
can listen to it for hours on end. Just kidding.
We will not link that.
Yeah.
It's funny. There's freedom in our hearts and in our minds when we're free from the opinions of others.
Yes. Yes.
Ugh. This is the best.
It is.
And it's good to receive critical feedback. It's good to be open to people, that people would say something and say, hey, your performance in this area, it's not like performance isn't a thing. But there's something too, like deep down, when our identity is not based, and the foundation of our identity is not in a coworker's opinion, or a neighbor's opinion, or even a pastor's opinion, or a spouse's opinion, or mom and dad's opinion.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all relationships that are important and good, but they can bring so much weight and heaviness when we're looking to this person. Pastors do it all the time.
Sure.
It'd be easy to be like, oh, Jackie's a member of my church. Jackie's so cool. And then what if Jacki feels led to another church? And then
Is this a bad time to tell you I'm actually leaving?
Yikes. I'm preemptively trying to get you to perform and say, I'm just kidding, totally. No, but I mean, that's a thing.
Because it's so volatile.
That's right.
I mean, that's what I felt. I would come home from work, my poor husband, and I would be like, and then this happened, and then they said this, and so what do you think? What do you think that means? You know?
Oh my gosh.
And I would replay all these stories,
Oh my gosh.
and he would just be like, And even in thinking about this podcast, he's like, you don't do that anymore. I'm like, thank God. That was such a horrible way to live.
Yeah. One of the things you said I really liked is that you said, I mean, you knew from the Lord that it wasn't the time. And I don't think we really talk about that enough, even from the front, where we talk to people about, like, when you're asking for things from the Lord, asking prayer, and we've probably all experienced it. We're like, I'm pretty sure the Lord's saying yes to this. I think almost 100% of us think, okay, that's happening tomorrow. That's happening next week. You know, that's,
right.
and then
Why else would he tell me?
Right.
Does he not know how impatient I am?
Exactly. And then when it doesn't happen, like the next hour, you know, then we're like, God's so disappointing, and I'm so upset with the Lord. I don't even know if he's real. You know,
I didn't hear him right.
I didn't hear him. Oh, I didn't hear him right. And you did hear him right.
Yeah.
To go on sabbatical, but you didn't hear him right. I know, right? And I'm just throwing it out there as like, you know what? That's as much a part of the process is getting his timing right as anything. In fact, we can put ourselves in a bad spot when we try to do our own timing. You alluded to that when you've talked about you know, that with Abram and you know, that type of thing, the Ishmael type thing. That's really easy to do because we get impatient. But and again, you know, sometimes you wonder about that. Is you called it gold medal? I like that. Is it that the Lord just wants us to be with him more? Like sometimes it's not the right timing because he's just like, let's just keep talking about this. Let's just see where we're going to be at in this. I don't know. Maybe he thinks like that. I'm not positive about that. But then the other thing was he obviously had some things he wanted to do with you.
Yeah.
Because now grab this. This is really cool. Because he wanted them to have a better mom. If you're going to be spending all that time with them,
100%.
let's have a better mom. Let's have one that looks more like Jesus.
Yeah.
We're not talking about performance here. We're talking about being pruned in the likeness of Jesus, and then they get a Jesus mom.
Yes.
You know,
so beautiful.
I know, it's awesome. So he's not only thinking about you, he's thinking about this beautiful girl.
That's awesome.
As well.
That's awesome, right?
Yeah. I love that perspective.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard because, you know, as parents, you know, that identity thing with like the behavior of our kids. You know, if you're wounded as a parent and your identity is in the performance of your kids, because then it shows the world that you're a good parent, right? It's all about us.
You're right.
You know,
my kids never misbehave.
No, I'm not talking about you.
No,
I'm not.
Kids,
No,
not
it's
your kids.
Yeah.
and it's so interesting. Like, actually, I think your point is exactly right, Raz. Our kids experience pain when our identity is based in their performance, and then we take it out on them when they don't obey us in the grocery store, and people are seeing that we're not great parents, and then we start lashing out, or we wait till we go home and then we lash out. I think you're exactly right. When our identity is healthy, then our relationship with the people around us is healthier as well.
Right.
Yes.
It's a big deal. I think that's right, Raz. That's good.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about business, but it looks like we're going to be doing that the next time that we have this episode. But I'm wondering, would you be willing to pray over the listeners? However you want to pray, but I'm thinking about the listener who wants to step into hearing God's voice more and maybe wants to be used in prophetic ministry. You mentioned 1 Corinthians 12 and 1 Corinthians 14. It says, eagerly desire spiritual gifts, especially that you would prophesy.
Sure.
That's what you quoted. So I'm thinking about praying for those folks
Mm-hmm.
that want to grow in that area. Maybe praying for some moms.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Praying for some moms that might be listening, that maybe their identity has gotten really wrapped up in working or not working.
Yep.
Gotten really wrapped up in kiddos, wrapped up in spouse. And anyone else that you can think to pray of, like specifically pastors that you love, maybe you can just pray for them as well.
Just bless them.
But no, in
Staying
all
at the
seriousness.
church that you're.
He just gives us a random vote. We both just want to vote.
Particularly one with a great beard. But just pray for the listeners.
Yeah.
In those areas and anything else the Lord leads. And then let's keep conversation going about business here in a sec.
Okay. All right, Jesus, we thank you so much for every single person who is privy to hear this podcast. I just ask for a blessing over their life, that they would experience an increase of intimacy with you, that they would experience the gift of knowing you more, hearing your voice, seeing your face, dreaming with you, Jesus. I ask they would release prophetic gifting over them now in this moment. I ask, Jesus, that you would patch up identities to be able to walk in prophetic gifting, that it wouldn't be performance-based, that it would just be a gift to draw closer to you. I also pray for all of the parents, especially some of the mamas out there in this transitional season of back to school and sports and academics. There's so much performance, Jesus, that we would see our kids the way that you see them, and that we would steward them the way that you would want us to steward them, that you would make us the parents that they need. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie, for being here. We love you so much. You and Joel and your awesome girls are so beautiful. We love your family.
Best.
So thanks for taking time out to be here with us and share what God's been doing in your life, and that is amazing. We will, as usual, we've got stuff we'll put below where you guys can contact us. So there might be some of you who really want to follow up. I hope there is. Who want to follow up on this idea of hearing from the Lord. Maybe through us, we can have them get hold of you, Jackie. Would that be cool? Like if somebody's really, maybe again as a mom, and I mean whatever that the Lord will do to use this. And so thanks, Dr. J. Especially thank you again, Jackie. And I'm Raz, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for looking in.